in the future year. And it is a blessing of Islam and the teachings of the Ahlul Bayt that we are told about these nights and that we should take advantage of them. And as well, of course, it was the martyrdom of Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. And that in itself is part of the divine wisdom of Allah, that we call Allah on one of the nights of Qadr. We begin in His name, remembering Amir al-Mu'mineen. But sometimes the qada, the qadar, the destiny, the fate that God has determined becomes difficult for us to understand. Or even worse, it becomes difficult for us to bear. We may be going through difficult times in our own individual lives, whether we're dealing with an illness ourselves, one of our family members, or we might be going through financial strain, uncertainty, or even poor relationships that we might have with our family members, and we simply can't figure out how to reconcile them. And in this time, in our day, for whatever reason, in whatever wisdom, we also hear and witness on the media everywhere across the world that Muslims and the oppressed and the weak are going through pain and they are suffering, whether it is in our own country or in other countries, that evil forces are showering destruction upon them all across the world. And sometimes this makes us question about the mercy and compassion of God. Where is that mercy, and where is that compassion, and where is that justice that God has promised to humankind? But we must take consolation first and foremost in the greatest blessing that Allah has given us. And that is not the sustenance that He gives us in our material sense, but the guidance that He has given us as a sustenance for our spirits and our souls and our hearts. This guidance, this light that allows us to go back unto Him. Whether we as humans realize it or not, we are journeying back unto Allah. As I've mentioned in the past few nights, there are many ahadith of Imam Ali in particular where it is reported that he said, in one hadith, he says, "Ad-dunya daru mamarrin ila dar maqar." The world is a course, it's a sort of a world of passing, of traversing, through which we must pass to reach our permanent home. It's just a journey, it's just a few days, a few years that we have to figure out how to navigate. And every single breath that we take takes us closer to our ultimate home. Nafasul mar'i khutahu ila ajalih. The Imam is reported to have said, each breath is another step towards death. Each breath that goes in and that comes out. And so we should thank Allah and take consolation and lesson from the teaching of those guides, because Allah has granted us those guides to navigate through this journey. That light, it allows us to move forward and to make good decisions, or the best decisions that are possible. Now, one hadith of our first Imam, Imam Ali alayhi salam, that seems relevant for our time, Sallu ala Muhammad, is the following hadith, wherein the Imam talks about destiny and this apportionment, this qadar and this qada. It is reported that the Imam said, when someone asked him about al-qadar, su'ila anil qadar, the Imam responds, طريق مظلم فلا تسلكوه وبحر عميق فلا تلجوه وسر الله فلا تتكلفوه. It is a dark road, when we are thinking about what are the wisdom behind God's apportionment, God's destiny, our fate that God has decided, whether, again, whichever level that we are thinking about, the Imam says, it's a dark road. It's a difficult road. Don't tread it. Don't walk on that road. It's a deep sea. Don't enter it. It's God's mystery. Don't torment yourself trying to understand the qadar and the qada of God, the destiny that God has apportioned for us. In other words, trying to understand God's decrees and how He figures out and He determines our future, and also what role we have in determining that future and whether we can change it or not, are far too difficult for us to understand. We cannot fathom a God who works and is beyond time, who can see all of our actions and all of our lives as though it is the present, and knows who we are in the depths of our heart. Things that we might not even be conscious about regarding ourselves, about ourselves. And He knows what is good or what is bad for us. And not just us, but He is totally aware of all of His creation, and He apportions precisely for every single one of His creation. And so the Imam says, don't try to necessarily figure out all the ins and outs of God's creation, particularly those things that are beyond my capacity to know. Now this applies to the basic idea, the theory and the structure of Allah's destiny, but even to particular events. And sometimes this is the real question that we have in our own lives. Why did God send me this illness? Why am I suffering through it? Or why did Allah allow this person to do this to me? I understand that each individual has a free will, but the question becomes, why did God place this person who is doing this evil in my life, in that journey that I have been placed in? Or sometimes we might ask, why does Allah allow so much evil to spread through His creation? And these are very difficult questions to sometimes answer for ourselves in a way that we are satisfied with. But Allah in His Quran says, don't worry, we are not the only ones who ask this question. When Allah created Nabi Adam, the angels themselves ask a very similar question. وَإِذْ قَالَ رَبُّكَ لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ إِنِّي جَاعِلٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ خَلِيفَةً قَالُوا أَتَجْعَلُ فِيهَا مَنْ يُفْسِدُ فِيهَا وَيَسْفِكُ الدِّمَاءَ وَنَحْنُ نُسَبِّحُ بِحَمْدِكَ وَنُقَدِّسُ لَكَ. When Allah says to His angels that I am creating a Khalifa on this earth, He says that the angels respond, are you going to create a being who is going to cause corruption on your earth? And he is going to spill blood. All the while we do your praise and we praise you and we glorify you. In other words, we do good, but then this creation, this creature that you're going to create, he has the potential for quite a bit of evil and destruction. Allah responds, قَالَ إِنِّي أَعْلَمُ مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. I know something that you don't. I have created a good in this human that far surpasses any good that any angel can do. Allah has a far superior knowledge of His creation than we could possibly imagine. But unfortunately, sometimes personally we can't leave it at that. We may not know the exact wisdom of God's plan, but we still need to act and we still need to live our lives. And Islam also guides us here. And it gives us the tools to navigate the uncertainty of our lives and the crises that we might face. I'll just spend the rest of the time that we have mentioning three of those main tools. First, we should recognize that God, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is the creators of the heavens and the earth and all that is in between, all of these creatures that cause all of this corruption and all of this, they spill all of this blood. Allah is watching over all of them. It is said in history that there used to be a group, a religion that would say it is not possible for the God that creates all goodness, that creates light, to be the same God that creates all of the darkness and all of the suffering and evil in this world. So there must be two gods, these people used to say. One in charge of light, one in charge of good, and another in charge of darkness. One who creates good and another who sends out evil. And this type of thinking sometimes seeps into our hearts, and we might even think in this way, God forbid. That this is, for example, out of God's hands and out of God's control. That God, this is such a great evil and such a great difficulty that God can't even protect me. Na'udhu billah. But Islam teaches us that no, all of creation is under the command of Allah. He created all things, so we seek refuge in Him from all of the apparent evil that I might be living and suffering through, and even all of that evil that we might hide in our hearts or we do in our homes. Surah Al-Falaq, we're all familiar with it, and sometimes the more familiar we are with something, the more hidden it is from us and the less we think about it. Allah says in Surah Al-Falaq that call upon me and seek refuge in me for all of the darkness that you might experience and you might face in your life. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل أعوذ برب الفلق من شر ما خلق ومن شر غاسق إذا وقب ومن شر النفاثات في العقد ومن شر حاسد إذا حسد. Say, I seek refuge and I seek protection of the Lord of the daybreak, from the evil of what He has created, and from the evil of the dark night when it falls, and from the evil of the witches who blow on knots, and from the evil of the envious one who envies. This surah of the Quran, Allah talks about the darkness, because a lot of times it is in darkness that people bring out the most evil. When evil is hidden, when people do the worst that they can, because no one, they think, can see them, and they are hidden from the eyes of maybe, na'udhu billah, even Allah Himself. That they are not going to be held accountable for what they do. But Allah says, seek refuge in the Lord who created not just the darkness, but also the daybreak, the moment when everything comes to the fore, when light seeps through the entire creation, when every single individual's actions are going to be held to account. And then He says, from the evil of the darkness when it falls, and from the evil of those who blow on knots, and they do explicitly in their actions, they do evil things. So outwardly, sometimes we do evil, and we project that evil towards others, but then sometimes the evil is deep within our hearts. And that is the evil of those who are envious when they envy someone else. Envy does not necessarily affect you, but it affects me in my heart. It destroys and it starts to eat up my heart and the goodness that could have been sustained there. And so whether it is the evil that is apparent or the evil that is hidden in the recesses of our hearts, all of that is in the sight of Allah, and all of that we ask Allah for His protection. So that is the first tool. That's the Ahlul Bayt, and Islam has given us, is to seek protection in Allah and know that Allah is watching over all things. The second is that the Ahlul Bayt tell us to recognize our own ignorance, to recognize our own lack of knowledge. I shouldn't be constantly stating facts, and neither I know nor anyone else, whether they're experts or lay people, can know what will happen even in the next moment of my life. Not even to talk about tomorrow or next month or a year from now. We have no idea what will happen. We're all just basically shooting in the dark when we're talking about the future. We may have studied a certain field, say politics, international relations, medicine, history, and so on, and we can maybe with that knowledge make better predictions about what's going to happen. But they are, in the end of the day, just predictions. And when we don't know, we should at the same time be comfortable in saying so. And so in another hadith of Amirul Mu'mineen, Imam Ali alayhi salam, he says, Man taraka qawla la adri, a person who stops saying I don't know will be struck with the death blow. A person who stops saying that, recognizing, in other words, that he is not aware of the guidance or the qadar, the destiny of Allah, then that person has basically decided his own fate and his own death. In other words, if I decided something, for example, this was an election year that just passed, I decided something in the recent elections, and things didn't work out as I had thought. Or maybe I made a financial decision and it ended up in failure. I shouldn't just stick to my decision and justify it constantly for all of time. If I made that choice with the best possible information, this is the third thing that Islam gives us, Islam teaches us. If I made the choice with the best possible decision, the best possible information that I had, and I had the proper niyat, in other words, I made the decision based on the right process to reach the best outcome. It's not just to say that I choose the right process, whatever outcome it might be. I'm looking at both, the outcome as well as the process. The rest of it, I put in Allah's hands, for Him to use my actions as He sees fit. And so Allah tells His Prophet, فَاعْفُ عَنْهُمْ وَاسْتَغْفِرْ لَهُمْ وَشَاوِرْهُمْ فِي الْأَمْرِ. Forgive them and ask for forgiveness for them and seek their advice in the affair. فَإِذَا عَزَمْتَ فَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ. Once you make your decision, once you have decided, then have trust in Allah. إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُحِبُّ الْمُتَوَكِّلِينَ. Indeed, Allah loves those who trust in Him. So, even for the Prophet of Allah, he says, make your decision based on the information that you have, ask around, do mushawara and consult other people who may know certain things, or Allah will place certain things on their tongues. And then once you have reached that result, once you have made your decision, then put the conclusion in God's hands. And Allah will redirect your actions so that inshallah it reaches the best result. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إنا أعطيناك الكوثر فصل لربك وانحر إن شانئك هو الأبتر. صلوات. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونستهديه ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهد الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدًا عبده ورسوله أرسله بالهدى ودين الحق ليظهره على الدين كله ولو كره المشركون صلوا على محمد وعلى محمد
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد
وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين علي أمير المؤمنين وفاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين والحسن والحسين وعلي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي والحجة بن الحسن القائم المهدي عجل الله تعالى فرجه الشريف.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
أوصيني وإياكم بتقوى الله وأستغفر الله لي ولكم. I call all of you, and before that I call myself towards taqwa, and I ask forgiveness for my own shortcomings and for yours as well. In this khutbah, I will just mention two other tools that the Ahlul Bayt give us, and the first is the resilience that comes when we know that there was an evil that was wrought not on people like us, but upon the greatest of God's creation, those like the Prophet of Allah and Amirul Mu'mineen and the rest of the Ahlul Bayt. If Allah does not stop His decree or His destiny for a person like Rasulullah, and He allows that destiny to move forward, and He allows history to play its part in undoing and presenting to us the destiny and the decree of Allah for the Prophet, then for a person like me or for a time like ours, Allah is also going to allow that to happen. And so the Prophets all passed away. Many of them were killed, many of them reached martyrdom, and they suffered very great, and their people caused them quite a bit of evil. And so we take solace that we are a part of their community, and we take their example in terms of the patience that they had in that decree. The second thing is also that the Ahlul Bayt teach us to do dua. And they say that this dua that we do, this prayer that when we raise our hands in the face of God, that Allah can in fact change our fate and our destiny. It's not for nothing, in other words. These are not just words that we say to console ourselves, to say that at least I have done something. Or maybe even I say that at least that this gives me some peace, or maybe it's some sort of na'udhu billah meditation that we are doing. This gives me peace in my heart, and that's all. But Allah says, and His Ahlul Bayt teach us, that our du'as can change our fate and our destiny. Even those things that have been determined by God Himself. But because God has promised us that He will answer our call, Ud'uni astajib lakum, pray to me and I will respond, then He will at times, sometimes prioritize our calls over the destiny that He has chosen. And so it is reported from one of the Ahlul Bayt that he said, Inna du'a yaruddul qada yanquduhu kama yunqadu silku wa qad ubrima ibrama. That dua can push back and change destiny and undo it. And he gives this example of a piece of thread. So imagine a piece of thread, right? And it's twisted very tightly. And it's very difficult for me, without maybe even a microscope sometimes, to undo that thread. My eyes are going a little bit weak. Maybe you don't need a microscope, but I need thick glasses. Figure out exactly where the thread can be taken apart. The Imam says that dua can actually, just like a thread that's been twisted, if you pay attention, you can undo that thread. Allah will undo the destiny and the apportionment and the qadar that He has determined for you. And so let us, in this moment, before we begin the salat, let us do a dua. This is a dua that has been mentioned by some of our scholars in some of our ahadith. This is a dua that was done in the morning of the 21st by the Imam. He says, Ya Allah, Ya Allah, Ya Allah, Ya Rabbah, Ya Rabbah, Ya Rabbah, Ya Sayyidi, Ya Sayyidi, Ya Sayyidi, Ya Mawlai, Ya Mawlai, Ya Mawlai. أسألك في هذه الغداة أن تصلي على محمد وآل محمد وأن تجعلني من أوفر عبادك وسائليك نصيبا وأن تمن علي بفكاك رقبتي من النار. We ask Allah to increase our sustenance, increase the rizq that He has given us, and to allow us to be on His path, and as well to free us from the hellfire and the punishment for the sins and the evil that we have committed. And ultimately, we do dua. وَأَن تَأْذَنَ لِفَرَجِ مَنْ بِفَرَجِهِ فَرَجُ أَوْلِيَائِكَ وَأَصْفِيَائِكَ مِنْ خَلْقِكَ. That, O Allah, Muslims throughout the world are going through a great deal of suffering that I personally cannot possibly imagine. Their children, na'udhu billah, sometimes are being killed right in front of their eyes. Oh Allah, allow for that faraj, the faraj of your awliya that comes through that faraj, and of your asfiya that comes through that faraj. Oh Allah, hasten the reappearance of our final Imam so that not only your will is done, but so that we come out of this state of uncertainty and you take full measure for the evil that is done, whether it is in your name or in any other name. O Allah, hasten the reappearance of our final Imam and fulfill your promise to mankind to fill this earth with justice and peace as it has been filled with injustice and evil. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. صلوا على محمد.